CBS, America's #1 independent television network, presents the following sports exclusive.
From the men who brought you basically a sports show, if your football fix wasn't met on Thursday night, it's time for an additional slice. This is basically a football show. Right now, let's go!
Sims gonna go deep. Watch Cooper. Cooper's got it. Touchdown, Alabama.
And the kick is blocked. Appalachian State has stunned the college football world. Heaving one deep, and it is caught. Jalen Strong. Do you believe it? Arizona State wins on a Hail Mary. Here comes a blitz. It's picked up. The ball's out. Darren Lee's got it for Ohio State. Going for the exclamation point. Touchdown, Buckeyes.
Ladies and gentlemen, football fans, welcome to Season 3 of Basically a Football Show. I'm Zach. Along with me is Greg. And Greg, we have an undisputed national champion for the first time.
I'm still buzzing from the last show we did for college football, way back when that undisputed national champion won that championship.
Your Ohio State Buckeyes were the first undisputed playoff champions. They were in the playoff along with Alabama, who they demolished, and Oregon, who they also similarly demolished, and Florida State. This year, it's kind of an open field. I think Ohio State is clearly the best returning team from last year. TCU and Baylor are still going to be good as long as one of them decides to actually win the conference outright. Alabama's still solid, but there's a lot of turnover in the SEC, there's a lot of quarterback battles all over the country. But before we get into everything else, I want to talk about the playoff in particular. What did we learn in the first season of the playoff that we take into year 2?
I think one of the things last year that may have led to a lot of controversy towards the end was the fact that they released the rankings every week. Now, as guys that do a football podcast, we want that, we need that, but overall, do you think it might be better if they didn't start releasing the top 4? I forget when they started. It was like week 5. I don't remember.
Yeah, they're moving that back this year. I think they're starting in week 7 with the playoff rankings. If they had come out and put those rankings out there, that the top 4 was what it was: Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Florida State. If that was just what it was, people would say, okay, sure. If those were the rankings as we had seen them with fresh eyes, everybody would have been okay with it. But the way the college football landscape works, you have to have the rankings. There's discussion, there's controversy. It adds an extra level of discussion. If we wanted to limit controversy or something, then you would just put out the 1.
I like that it's there. I just I do think, though, that I don't know that it was controversial, sure. I think if there's one thing I'd like to see is a little more transparency out of the people that do the selecting. As we go along, tell us why this team dropped out. And you brought up Florida State, the defending champions, and I think that that's what kept them in the playoff hunt throughout the year, because they were the defending champions, because we talked about it a lot last year, that team, at no point did I ever think that they deserved the ranking that they had, because they just weren't that good. And Oregon proved that in the first game of the playoff. So it's going to be interesting to see if Ohio State gets the same benefit of the doubt this year.
I don't even think Ohio State's going to need the benefit of the doubt, because let's get right into talking about the conferences. We'll start off in the Big Ten. The first ever unanimous preseason #1 in the AP poll.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why I don't think Ohio State's going to be on top of the pedestal. As long as they win as long as they win all their games, there will be no reason to have them pull a Florida State and pull them down, because I think the Big Ten schedule is better. Their non-conference schedule's all right, but I think we've seen what Ohio State can do, and we know that it's not just like with Florida State. It was a lot of, well, James Winston's really good. With Ohio State, it's, they won with 2 different quarterbacks last year, and that controversy is still going in here as we go into week 1. It looks like JT Barrett is going to be the starter from what I hear.
The consensus is that he's going to be the starter. A lot of people think that he should be the starter. I mean, Cardell Jones played great last year.
Of course, he played in the 3 biggest games of the season. Right,
and he looked great in every one of them. But the consensus here is that overall, as a quarterback, JT Barrett's probably your better option. But again, though, I don't mind having Cardell Jones as a backup. The thing what I don't want to see happen is it turn into let's say they go out and they play Virginia Tech on Monday night. They win, but they don't win convincingly. Right out of the gate, you're going to start hearing Buckeye Nation start with if Cardale Jones was the quarterback or vice versa, whoever ends up starting, you're going to hear that the other one should have been the guy. And I don't want that to happen. But if there's one coach that can handle it, it's Urban Meyer. I think that I want to say that it wasn't quite like this, but there was a year where he had Chris Leak, and it was Tim Tebow's freshman year.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Exactly.
Yeah, and they kind of worked it out. So I think if there's a guy that can handle it, it's Urban Meyer.
I think the important thing for Urban Meyer to do is to definitively pick a starting quarterback, though.
Right.
Because if you can't have them like splitting series. Like if you use it exactly like a Tim Tebow situation where you bring him in certain situations. You're not switching off series, you're not switching halves, you're not doing any of that stuff. As long as you say JT Barrett is our starter and Cardale Jones is the quarterback in this package that we will use at the goal line, that we will use on fourth down or something like that. And it's not like Cardale Jones is going to go anywhere. Cardale Jones is going to get the helm to this ship at some point. The two of them, they already forced out Braxton Miller. Now he's going to be an H-back, a wide receiver, something like that.
Are you surprised at all that Braxton Miller stayed at Ohio State? I really thought he would transfer because you had Oregon sitting there that needed a quarterback that he would fit great in that system.
Sure.
Florida State, there were a lot of teams out there that could have used him. I don't know if he decided, look, my NFL future is not that bright as a quarterback, so I'll try to play H-back. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how he is as a player at a different position.
I think it might be smart for him to do what he's doing because you look at guys that are similar to him that have moved on to the NFL, and there's guys like Tebow, there's guys like Cordell Stewart, Seneca Wallace, I guess, is an example.
Well,
of these guys.
Denard Robinson was the guy that played quarterback at Michigan. He's a running back now, small running back, but yeah.
Right. It's guys like that where, you're a very good college quarterback, but you move on to the next level and you can't be a quarterback. So he sees an opportunity where he doesn't have to be the quarterback and the team will still be extremely successful and he can work on another position and maybe improve his NFL prospects. It's a smart move by him if only because he's still going to be in a national championship contending team, and based on from all accounts, he's still going to be a major player as far as the offensive scheme goes. So, and it's not all on him because he has Barrett. They have Ezekiel Elliott, who is being touted as a Heisman contender, along with whoever wins the starting quarterback job. Man, Ohio State's just loaded. They're just so loaded on offense.
They really are. And you look at really last year, they arrived a year early, which we see happen a lot in sports. And this was the year they were supposed to be what they are. And they're, normally I would always temper everything, my optimism with kind of like, let's not get carried away here. But the knock on the Big Ten for a long time, and rightfully so, was that they weren't fast enough to run with the SEC. They weren't big enough. They weren't fast enough to keep up with teams like Oregon. And last year, Ohio State showed that, they ran circles around both of those teams.
Yep.
And all they are is better this year. But, like any team, you've got to watch the injury bug. A couple key injuries and, right out the window it goes. So it's going to be a very interesting season for the Buckeyes.
And they have a couple suspensions going into week one. And, if this was last year and you're going to the Virginia Tech game, maybe there's some concern. Like, all these guys are injured or suspended. But and of course they lost to Virginia Tech last year. But I think Ohio State knows well and good. Well, we only lost to one team last year. We were the national champions. We could have been undefeated if it wasn't for that game. So let's go into their house and show them exactly what we're made of. Suspensions or not, quarterback controversy or not, Ohio State's going to put up a lot of points on Monday night, I think.
I hope. You never know. I would have said the same thing going into the game last year at Columbus, and this year they're playing in Blacksburg is where Virginia Tech is. So you never know. But and Urban Meyer's made it very clear. He's telling the team, we don't want to talk about defending anything. We don't want to talk about revenge. We want to go out and just play a good game every week and try to keep that out of your head. So don't go into the Virginia Tech game thinking about last year and wanting to put revenge on them. I think that's easier said than done.
Yeah, I don't see how you couldn't. But
I like the idea that he's trying to make sure that they stay focused on the ultimate goal instead of letting little things get in the way.
Yeah, and overall their schedule is it's good for them. In the division, they get the tough games, Penn State and Michigan State at home, and they don't have to face the top teams over in the other side of the conference, the very much the lesser side of this conference, no Wisconsin or Nebraska. but I assume they'd probably play somebody like Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game, and which they did last year and wasn't really a contest. Staying in their division, like I said, Ohio State, the number 1 team in the country preseason. The number 5 team in the country in that Eastern Division is the Michigan State Spartans. Connor Cook returns as the starting quarterback. He's a Heisman hopeful. Michigan State, they have a couple tough tests with Oregon, but they get that Oregon game at home. Of course, like I said, they play Ohio State in Columbus, and of course playing the reinvigorated Michigan with Jim Harbaugh. What do you see from the Michigan State Spartans? I
think you're going to see a lot like you saw last year. It's going to be a good team. They're always going to be tough on defense. They've got a potent offense. They're a good, solid football team, and they're coming into the season ranked number 5, so a lot of people like them. It's just going to be a matter of, if one thing that Michigan State, it's always bitten them over the years, is that they trip up and they lose a game that they probably shouldn't have, and it's just, that's something they've got to avoid. And again, they've got Ohio State this year in Columbus. That's going to be a tough contest for them. So they're going to be, the number 2 team probably in that division. I don't know what that's going to mean to their national championship hopes or their playoff hopes. I don't know that you're going to see 2 teams come out of the Big Ten, especially out of the same division. But they're going to have a really great season, and they're going to be tough. Ohio State cannot overlook them, and no one else should either.
Yeah, Michigan State's tough games. Week 2, they get Oregon at home. They actually have a decent home schedule. They're at Michigan, at Rutgers, home against Maryland, and then at Ohio State, and they finish up at Penn State, or home against Penn State, excuse me. I don't know. I think they're a big physical team, but are they as good as Ohio State? Going on the road to Ohio State, especially the second to last game of the year, both teams are probably going to have momentum by then, but that's Michigan State's only shot to really get anything out of this season, as opposed to just being the second best team in the conference and playing in like the Capital One Bowl or whatever. Or I guess if they're high enough in the rankings, they could still be selected for one of the other bowls.
Yeah, but it's just without a shot at the Big Ten championship game, and that's not to say they won't get one. I mean, they could very well be the team that comes out of the Big Ten, if the Big Ten gets a playoff team. What's interesting to me is that last year at this time, we were talking like the Big Ten might not even get into this thing.
Yeah.
And now we're coming into this year looking at it going, well, it's unfortunate.
A lot of people say the Big Ten's the second best conference in the country right now.
Well, we'll see. I mean, they took away a lot of the stigma that they had last year. Ohio State helped a lot. So Michigan State. And we'll see, but it's going to be. I think it's unfortunate that Michigan State and Ohio State are in the same division.
Yeah,
because it would be a lot more fun if you've got Michigan, Ohio State, and Michigan State all in the same division. Why not split that up a little bit? I know.
Well, they did. They had it split up. Remember?
Yeah, and then they went geographical, and now it's not.
Right. Well, because they split it and it was weird and it didn't make a whole lot of sense to some people. And then they brought in Maryland and Rutgers, and it's like, well, they're close to each other, so we're not going to split them up.
Right.
So this still works. They still get the rivalry games that they want. You still, Ohio State's going to play Michigan. Michigan's going to play Michigan State. Michigan State's going to play Ohio State. Penn State's going to play Michigan State. So the Big Ten East, it's just you look at this conference, and clearly the Eastern Division is the hard division.
I think you're going to see
the West is kind of
weak.
Nothing.
Yeah,
Wisconsin and Nebraska, and
Minnesota. Probably a 6 to 8 win team, probably maybe. But Wisconsin, Nebraska. I haven't been sold on Nebraska in a long, long time.
Oh.
That used to be a very powerful program, and not anymore. It's all in the East. You're right. I guess the only question I would have left about the Big Ten East is, what do you think about Harbaugh's impact on Michigan? Do you think it's going to be immediate, or?
I think there will be an impact. I think there's going to be an obvious impact. You've seen it everywhere he's been, whether it's the University of San Diego, whether it's at Stanford, whether it's the 49ers. He comes in and immediately gets everybody on the same page and puts people to task, and gets them aligned to the final goal. But does Michigan have the talent to work with? I think they finally named a starting quarterback. Their schedule is it's helpful. I mean, they have a decent schedule. They're at Penn State, but they're home against BYU and Ohio State. They open up on the road at Utah. The offensive line is better. But I think Jim Harbaugh is going to make that impact. As long as they have a strong offensive line, they get something out of the quarterback, Michigan will be in some games. And I mean, I think they're definitely going to be a bowl team.
I think so too. I think what you're going to see, one thing I've liked about Harbaugh is that he's not like a Rich Rodriguez, which I think was one of the biggest mistakes Michigan's ever made as far as coaching decisions go. But I think he's a good enough coach that he doesn't have to have a system, so to speak. Like he can say, okay, I'm a good enough coach. I can make a system to work with the talent I have on hand. And I think that's going to make them a lot better.
Yeah.
Whereas, with Rodriguez, he needed the guys to run that particular offense. And then poor Brady Hoke came in and he's like, Brady Hoke's old school 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And he's got a bunch of Rich Rodriguez guys. So I agree. They're going to be better this year. I think in a year or two, it's going to finally be a rivalry again with Ohio State. I don't say that because I'm an Ohio State fan, but let's be honest about it. The Michigan-Ohio State rivalry hasn't been much for the last 10 years or so, so it'll be nice to see that come back too.
Yep. They're two big rivalry games. They're both at home. Michigan State comes in the second week of October, and Ohio State is the regular season finale in Ann Arbor. Now, I think if there's one place where Jim Harbaugh makes a difference, could you imagine undefeated Ohio State marching into the big house?
Yeah.
National championship aspirations on the line, playoff aspirations, and then they get knocked out by the Wolverines and Jim Harbaugh?
Hey, you know what? That's a 50-50 proposition at this point. I think that's a very distinct possibility. And I also, if there's one thing about the Buckeye schedule I don't like, is they've got Michigan State and Michigan in consecutive weeks. That's a pretty tough road for them. But again, if they come through all that unscathed, then you know what? I think they've made their case if they win the Big Ten championship that they should be in the playoff.
Yep.
But it's right. I mean, the Big Ten all of a sudden is relevant again.
Yeah.
It took one season to do that, and here we are, and all of a sudden they're not the running joke of college football anymore. So that's kind of nice.
The other team to look out for in the East is Penn State, finally kind of recovering after all those years of sanctions and turmoil.
Right.
Offensive line is solid. The defensive front seven is solid. Where they're going to have to work hard is with their quarterback, Christian Hackenberg. He was touted as being a high recruit. He was lauded for staying at Penn State. He had a very good freshman and sophomore year. Was down last year. He'll probably have to come back this year. And then the schedule, they're at Ohio State, they're at Michigan, and at Michigan State.
That's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. But they do get – but then the rest of the schedule is Illinois, Northwestern, Minnesota, et cetera. So they get all those teams at home.
They're going to be much improved this year. I think that it's good that they're – I hope finally – it's kind of nice that – I don't want to say that we're at the point where it's not the first thing you think of with Penn State, but it doesn't seem to cast as big a shadow over them as it did, say, 2-3 years ago when the whole thing was going on. They're finally starting to get out from under the whole scandal a little bit, and that's probably a good thing.
Yep. Over in the Western Division of the conference, you know what it is. I guess the favorite on that side of the conference has to be Wisconsin again.
Probably, yeah.
They lose Melvin Gordon, but you know what you're going to get with Wisconsin. They're going to be physical. They're going to run the ball. And I think the thing that's really important to look at with Wisconsin and why they start out number 20 in the rankings, they're the only other ranked team in the Big Ten preseason. They open with Alabama. I think the game's in Atlanta.
Wow, that's a tough assignment for your first game.
I think maybe I'm wrong. But they open with Alabama, and that they're gonna get their doors run off. Or I think it's at Alabama.
Yeah, that's in Tuscaloosa. That's gonna be tough. Yeah, that's gonna be
a rough one.
And you don't think that Alabama's gonna want to lay out a little revenge on the Big Ten after last year?
Yeah, but this is the rest of their schedule. This is Wisconsin's schedule. Now tell me if you think that there's a game Wisconsin loses after that Alabama game. Miami, Ohio, at home. Troy at home. Hawaii at home. Iowa at home. At Nebraska. Home against Purdue. At Illinois. Home against Rutgers. At Maryland. Home against Northwestern. At Minnesota.
Yeah, there's a couple on there that might be a little tricky for them. I mean, you never know what you're going to get with Northwestern. They will knock teams off.
Right.
You never know what you're going to get with Nebraska, but more or less, I mean, I don't know. We liked Iowa last year, but I don't know enough about them this year to say whether I'm ready to take a flyer on them or not.
But what I'm saying here is no Ohio State.
No
Michigan, no Michigan State, no Penn State.
Nope.
None of the tough teams from the East are on Wisconsin's schedule. So they lose that opening Alabama game. They could very well run the rest of their schedule, losing the Big Ten title game to Oklahoma or to Ohio State probably. But even if that happens, they could still end the season as a top 10 team, simply because they've won games. Now they wouldn't have beaten anybody of any significance, but there's no one on their schedule besides this opening Alabama game.
No, not really. Nothing that you would get too worried about anyway.
No. They should be licking their chops, looking forward to that schedule that they're going to have to run through.
So we've probably got a potential rematch of Ohio State, Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game again this year, possibly.
And JT Barrett gets to get his pound of flesh. The other team of note, I guess, is Nebraska. 9-4, again, another 9-win season last year, but they fired Bo Pelini, Mike Riley of Oregon State fame, and San Diego Chargers fame too, right? He comes over to take over the reins for the Cornhuskers.
Yeah, but I don't know that the talent level is significantly different from Oklahoma State to Nebraska.
Yeah,
I think he's working with Oregon State. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Okay, I take that back.
It's a little different.
But I don't know that it's
Nebraska's in a downslope.
Yeah, I don't know if
they've won 9 games a lot, but
it's not a huge upgrade talent wise for him, I guess. I mean, Oregon State. I mean, they had what's his name, Sean Mannion. I think he's done finally.
Yeah.
But they had a couple of I just don't know that this isn't like moving from say Oregon State to like a top tier SEC or Pac-10 or even like an Ohio State, Michigan State or whatever. So. It'll be interesting there, but again, I think they're just stuck in that. They're going to be 8-9 wins, and they're not what they used to be anymore.
Yeah. The only other thing of note here in the Big Ten, Illinois, their head coach, former head coach now, Tim Beckman, fired before the season even starts.
That's not a good sign, is it?
No, but there's a lot of turmoil in the Illinois athletic department. And that's kind of putting it lightly. The athletic director should probably watch this back too. But Illinois as like a whole in their athletics program is just, they used to be halfway decent at football, really good at basketball.
Right.
And now they're kind of nothing that I can think of. They've taken a real downslope. So they're taking a step there, firing the head coach before, the week before the season starts. Right. Which is always a solid move.
Yeah. Any hope you had probably went out the window with that, but Illinois is, it's just one of those things where I think they've just got a long road ahead of them. They've got to kind of blow it up and start over basically at this point. Yeah. Try to get back to respectability.
So to close out the Big Ten, winning the Western Division, I think it's got to be Wisconsin. Winning the East, there's no reason to doubt Ohio State at this point. And then winning the conference, you got to put Ohio State to be a favorite to get back into that playoff and defend their national title.
I'll just say that it's nice to say this about my team, but they're the champions until somebody knocks them off.
Let's move over to the central of this country, the Big 12 conference made up of 10 teams, much like the Big 10 made up of 14 teams. Listen, the Big 12's got a couple things going for it. It's got TCU at number 2. It's got Baylor at number 4. Oklahoma at 19. And then the rest of the conference.
Kansas State might be halfway decent.
Texas, West Virginia.
Texas is another.
State can score some points.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
It'll be a fun conference to watch if you don't really much care about defense.
Right. Well, see, that's the interesting thing is I've been going through some of these things. So Baylor and TCU, clearly the class of the conference. Oklahoma's been getting a lot of sleeper love, is maybe able to weasel their way through and knock off one of those two, and then get some opportunity to win the conference with, obviously without a game. But it's something like Kansas State. A lot of people are like, oh, Kansas State, their defense is really good. Well, here's the thing. If what we're talking about if you're a team in the Big 12 and we're like, hey, their defense is going to be the story this year, then you're not going to win a whole lot of football games in this conference. Texas, hey, their defense is pretty good. Probably not going to win a whole lot of games. Same thing with West Virginia. Those are kind of the next level of teams. They're going to win their games. They're going to probably eventually qualify for a bowl. but they're not elite. Oklahoma's working its way back up to respectability, but really this conference is all about Baylor and TCU. It was last year, obviously co-champions. Both of them had really kind of viable claims to the playoff. TCU, even though they lost to Baylor on a last-second field goal, I think the final score of that game was like 65-62 in Waco. But Baylor, of course, had the claim because they beat TCU that they should have been in the playoff. Ultimately, neither. This year, the game moves to Fort Worth. And looking at their schedules and the talent they have coming back, there's no reason that it's not going to be a Baylor-TCU showdown at the end of the year to determine who wins that conference.
I just want to say, you talk about good defense in the Big 12. What that means is that when you play Baylor or TCU, you give up 35 instead of 60. I like this TCU team an awful lot. I liked them last year. And again, this is the conference. If you like a lot of points and you don't much care about defense, this is the one for you because there's going to be a lot of, 47, 42 games. But you're right. It's going to be Baylor and TCU and everybody else.
Baylor has some turnover on defense, but again, what does that matter? But they also have turnover at the quarterback spot, where TCU might have the advantages at the quarterback spot with Trevon Boykin, who's been heralded as a front runner for the Heisman right now. TCU opens up the season as the number 2 in both polls, the coaches and the AP poll. I've always had a soft spot for TCU. Maybe it's because I like the color purple. But, I look at their schedule. There's nothing. They're at Kansas State. They're at Oklahoma State. Their final 2 games, now this is the only place where maybe TCU trips up and screws itself over kind of like it did last year. Because if you remember last year, I think Baylor was the one who lost in West Virginia, and then they beat Texas, or then they beat TCU, and so they were tied that way. So this is something that could happen to TCU, not necessarily to West Virginia, but maybe at Kansas State. But the final 2 games of the year, they're at Oklahoma, and then home against Baylor. Back-to-back for the last 2 games of the year.
That's tough.
That's a little tough.
Yeah. But the rest of their schedule is pretty much cakewalk if you look at it. You never know. Yeah.
Stephen F. Austin, hey. You never know about the fighting
whatevers.
Austins.
Yeah. SMU, come on. Texas Tech, Kansas State might be a little bit of a test. I don't think West Virginia is going to be. But, yeah, it's TCU's. And like I said, I like this team a lot. I thought they were great last year. Between them and Baylor, I thought TCU was the better team.
Yeah, me too.
And it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out because it's going to be those 2 teams. And it's kind of unfortunate that they don't have a big enough conference to have a conference championship game at the end of the season. Yeah. It hurt them last year.
It's definitely being talked about now. Because of this, it spurred that conversation of, do you need to have the full 12? The NCAA is going to be, I guess, talking about it and vote on it. Not this year, but next year. So it wouldn't be in play this year. Baylor on the other side is, as far as their schedule goes, let's see, they're at Kansas, but Kansas is bad. They're at Kansas State. They're home against Oklahoma. These are their final 4 games. Final 5 games. They're at Kansas State, and they're home for Oklahoma, at Oklahoma State, at TCU, and then they're home against Texas to finish off the year. So a little rough stretch there between 3 and 4 weeks at Kansas State, home against Oklahoma, and then at TCU in the 4th game of that stretch. But and Baylor also has a little bit of off the field stuff going on with Art Briles, and I forget the name of the player.
Right.
Whether he knew that this player had rape accusations when he came there or whatever. I guess he transferred from Boise State, and Chris Peterson, now the coach at Washington, former coach at Boise State, had said that he told Art Briles about it, and then when the player came to Baylor, he got in trouble with it and whatever. So questioning kind of the character of the team, that sort of off-field distraction thing.
That's something that's been problematic in football. We've talked about it on basically a sports show numerous times, is that a lot of times if a player is really good, they will overlook certain transgressions, and that again, I don't like it any more than anybody else does, but it's the reality. So it'll be interesting to see if this has any effect on the team at all. You never know, but I got to kind of think it probably won't have that much effect once things get rolling.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I just think this conference is funny because of the big gap. Like, you have TCU at 2, Baylor at 4, Then you have to go all the way down to Oklahoma, who, again, we said it before we start talking. Oklahoma gets the benefit of the doubt because of reputation.
Right.
They're a team that has to prove it on the field, whether they're actually good or not. And again, with the schedule that the Big 12 presents, I don't know if they're ever going to be able to prove that until they play Baylor or TCU. But this conference is a whole lot of garbage.
It really is. It was last year. It's going to be again this year. You've got a traditional powerhouse in Texas that is just flailing at this point. I mean,
speaking of Texas, Charlie Strong is now going to go into his third year there.
I believe so.
How much rope do you give him?
I don't know.
How much longer is his leash there at Texas before he gets the axe?
I got to think I think it's this year or bust, because you're the University of Texas in a state that is as football crazy as it is.
Yeah.
And you can't recruit well enough to put together a team that should be contending for that conference. Yeah. I mean, that's just inexcusable. And I mean, I just don't get it, because they are the marquee team in the state of Texas.
Yeah. And I don't even think Charlie Strong's that bad of a coach. He's just, the things just haven't worked there for whatever reason. They also have a pretty rough schedule. Week 1, they're at Notre Dame. Then they get Cal, who's better, and then of course they're on the road at TCU, Oklahoma State, Baylor.
They could start out maybe 1-5 or 1-4 to start the season.
Yeah, and then of course they get Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry.
Yeah.
It's not the shootout anymore, Greg. No guns.
That's right. Yeah. Thank goodness they took care of that, huh?
Yeah, it's just it is strange, because this for the longest time it was Texas, Oklahoma, and now we're debating TCU and Baylor.
Well, there was a time there where it was Texas, Oklahoma, and every once, Kansas State would come out and they would go, whatever, and then lose. The 2 games they would lose would be to Texas and Oklahoma. Yeah. And that's just the way that conference worked. But now, Charlie Strong, I think if he doesn't, honestly, if they get out to a bad start and listen to that schedule, they could easily be 1-3, 1-4 to start the season, maybe even 0-4, who knows? I don't know that he might not get the axe right in the middle of the season at this point.
Yeah. Texas wouldn't stand for that.
No, but, and they shouldn't. I mean, again, taking it, just in the college football, sphere of things and all that. Yeah, they're Texas, and they can't be, third on the bill to TCU and Baylor. That's just not going to work at that university. It's just not going to work at all.
So who do we have coming out of the Big 12, do you think?
I like TCU. Yep. I like TCU.
I do too. Does the winner of this conference, they have to be undefeated to be a playoff contender, correct?
If everybody else is, I think so, yeah. I don't. A 1-loss TCU is probably not going to knock out a 1-loss Alabama or a 1-loss Auburn, something like that. No, probably not. And with Ohio State being defending national champs, probably not going to knock out a 1-loss Ohio State, depending on who the loss comes to.
And they have to be outright champions, right?
I think so. Yeah.
We can't have a situation like last year where. And I think, again, like I mentioned, last year it happened because Baylor had lost to West Virginia, then Baylor beat TCU, so they both had one conference loss too. So hopefully neither of them trips up, and they can really meet for that showdown. It'll be TCU's last game of the year. Baylor would still have to play Texas, but that's the game. You don't even have to watch any of the other games in the Big 12 this year. Move on to the Great South, the SEC, the best conference in college football. Wait, what? Best conference? I disagree, good sir. The SEC, it's definitely the deepest. It's always the most competitive. You want to look at the schedules on any of these teams, and every single team you pull up like, oh, that's a tough schedule. Oh, that's a tough schedule, because they're all going to play each other. It was definitely the Western Division last year was insane to watch between the 2 Alabama schools, the 2 Mississippi schools, but the race kind of fell apart down the stretch. Alabama ended up on top, as they usually do. Ole Miss, who is, to do the preseason rankings, Alabama comes in at number 3. Auburn is 6. Georgia in the SEC East is 9. LSU is 14, again in the West. Ole Miss 17. Arkansas is up there. They've got a good run defense working for them this year. They're at 18. And then you get Mizzou and Tennessee to round up the top 25. So again, the SEC is stacked. It's very deep. But the SEC is in a bit of a drought, Greg. 2 years and no national title.
Well, that gives you an idea of how good the conference has been, though, that we call 2 years without a title a drought. But yeah,
exactly.
I think it's just a matter of, just like we talked about it back when it was going on. Football, it's cyclical, and everybody kind of caught up with them, and now they're on a more even playing field. They're still great, but it's not as easy as it was before because obviously, you take pages out of the playbooks of teams in the SEC and you go, we can try this here. And then you bring a coach from the SEC like Urban Meyer to Ohio State, and things start evening themselves out. But still, to me, it's still the most entertaining conference in football. It might not be the best, but it's certainly the most entertaining, I think.
Definitely. Let's start in the Western Division. We'll start at the top. Alabama's ranked number 3 in the country right now, and they're probably always going to be. Interesting stat I heard this week. Alabama, every year since 2008, has been ranked number 1 in the country at some point during every single season.
Wow.
Since 2008.
Wow.
Which is amazing to think about, just based on the amount of roster turnover that there is in college football. And you look at Alabama, and yeah, sure, there's question marks. Like, they don't know who's their quarterback going to be. But to be fair, nobody in the SEC really has a good returning starting quarterback outside of Auburn, I guess. And Auburn's returning starter played a few snaps last year. That's his claim to fame. And Dak Prescott with Mississippi State in the Western Division. But what more can we say about Alabama and the Nick Saban dynasty at this point that hasn't already been said? They're good. They're always going to have the talent, and there's going to be a lot of rough and tumble. But at the end of the day, they're probably going to win the West. Or whoever wins the Iron Bowl will win the Western Division, and they'll be in the playoff and they'll compete for a national title because that's just what Alabama does. I
can tell you how great they've been over this stretch with Nick Saban. That you heard me say it last year. I didn't care about winning the national championship. I just wanted to beat Alabama because to me,
sure,
that was the brass ring, man. And they're going to be right there again. I mean, who are we kidding? There's no point in even trying to make a case that they won't be. He's a great coach. They're a great team, and they're going to be right in the thick of it, right down the line. I like Auburn a lot this year, and I think a sleeper team, if you want to pick a sleeper team out of the SEC, I think LSU might cause some problems this year. Yep. But it's going to be a brutal conference like it is every year, and Alabama's going to play a role in it at some point.
Yep. We'll move to their neighbors, just the South, Auburn. Like I said, I think this side of the division, as long as LSU does have the potential to screw this up for everybody else, but as it has been at least the last 4 or 5 years or so, the winner of the Iron Bowl, the Auburn-Alabama game, is probably going to win this division. Auburn, they have a new offensive coordinator, and this offensive coordinator was actually a high school quarterback for Gus Malzahn when Malzahn was a high school coach.
Wow.
Will Muschamp, the fired Florida coach, is now the defensive coordinator at Auburn, and Will Muschamp was the defensive coordinator at Texas during the Mack Brown years, the most successful Mack Brown years. And like I said, they have a returning quarterback in Jeremy Johnson who is going to improve. And Auburn, they were okay at running the football, and they're going to be a little bit better at that. But having a quarterback that's able to throw will be a big difference.
That's a huge difference for them,
in the SEC.
Yeah.
Because really, there's not – it's weird, and I've kind of seen this across the country, and it's something I was going to bring up later. There's a lot of quarterback battles in every team in the country. Really, the only big returning starter we named in the Big 12 was Trayvon Boykin. As far as like big names, Heisman Trophy candidates, I guess Connor Cook at Michigan State, and of course but even in Ohio State where you have Heisman type quarterbacks with either JT Barrett or Cardell Jones, still no clear-cut favorite there.
Right.
But in the SEC, Jeremy Johnson's really the only quarterback. Like I said, I guess Dak Prescott at Mississippi State too. But Mississippi State is going to be down from all accounts, which is strange too. But what do you think about Auburn? Of course, always a contender now.
I think I'm right there with you. They win the Iron Bowl, they're in the thick of it. Everything, the entire SEC world comes down to that game most of the time.
Usually.
It's the greatest, I think it's the greatest rivalry in college football. It's just an awesome game, and I like Auburn. Again, Alabama, always in the thick of it, but this year I think Auburn's going to be a real test for them, and I like this LSU team an awful lot. So it's just going to be kind of one of those deals we're going to have to let it play out and see. But the fact that if Auburn can throw the ball with any kind of consistency, that makes them a lot better than they normally are. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be, Alabama is, they're going to have a great defense, but I like Auburn. And again, we'll know more as we get closer to it, but the Iron Bowl is going to decide it. It's as simple as that.
Yep. Auburn's schedule is not terrible. They host Louisville here in week 1. Jacksonville State in week 2. That's their cupcake this year. Or no, sorry. They also play Idaho the week before Alabama.
Yeah, they always schedule that scrimmage game before Alabama. Both teams do it, yeah.
But they're at LSU, which is going to be rough. They host Mississippi State. They host San Jose State. Weird. At Kentucky, at Arkansas. Arkansas has been going to be much improved. Home against Ole Miss. At Texas A&M. Home against Georgia. And then, of course, they host Alabama, but the location never really matters in that game.
Not so much, no.
So they're going to have a tough schedule, but like I said, everybody in the SEC has a tough schedule.
What do you think?
He's got to be the best team.
What do you think, like Ole Miss and Mississippi State? Because they were, if you remember, there was a point last season where they were the center of the college football universe. Yeah,
Ole Miss, they start off number 17. Again, they were weird because they were up there with everybody else, right? They were contending. There was this. They still had the opportunity to win the SEC West, and then they lost 4 of the last 6 games, including getting absolutely demolished by TCU in that Peach Bowl. I think they lost 45-2 or 45-6, something like that.
That's my thing, though. I'm wondering because I know that that Ole Miss is ranked. Are they both ranked this year? Mississippi State.
Mississippi State is. From all accounts, they're the first team out.
Okay, but I'm wondering how much of that is just carryover from last year because of the two, I think Ole Miss was kind of a mirage last year because they got a big win. They knocked off Alabama, right? Was that their big win?
Yes, yeah.
And of course, everybody gets excited, and that's what happens with the regular top 25 is that things like that happen, and you start making teams better than they probably are.
Yeah.
And, Dak Prescott is always going to be a factor at Mississippi State, but I'm just wondering if last year was a little more of a mirage than people want to admit. And I don't know if these teams are as good as we'd like to think they are.
Well, I think with Ole Miss, their defense is going to be good. Their defense is going to be very good. They'll turn over in the secondary, but they're deep. They're talented all over the defense. Their front 7 is great. And even though they got blown out by TCU, and TCU put up a lot of points, the defense still forced like 3 turnovers. And I think TCU scored 35 points in the first quarter, and then that was, I think they allowed 1 touchdown the rest of the way.
Well, and you also got to kind of take into consideration too with that bowl game is you've got a TCU team that's there. They're there to prove a point.
Yeah.
And Ole Miss is, like you said, they lost 4 of their last 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, they're just like, hey, let's just get this done and go home. So you can't really put a whole lot of emphasis on how a team performed in a bowl game, but defensively they'll be tough. I just don't know that they're as good as, what are they, 12? Is that what I saw or no?
17.
17, I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't know that they're even that good. And it's just going to be, I think the SEC West this year, I'm going to be curious to see how much Arkansas has improved. But, LSU wasn't as good as they normally are last year. And Mississippi State and Ole Miss kind of took advantage of that with, kind of a couple of teams that are normally there not being there.
Yeah.
A&M got off to the great start last year and kind of slowed towards the end. So I don't know. I'm not as sold on, I'd like to see them both do well, but I'm not sold on either one of them at this point.
No, definitely. Ole Miss has to get some offense. They lose their starting quarterback. Defense will be good, but I don't know if they have the points, the offensive ability either. I think, like you mentioned, I think the team that could really throw the wrench into this SEC West is LSU. Their running game is going to be one of the best in the conference, one of the best in the country. Leonard Fournette is going to be the head of that offensive production. But LSU, when we talk about the schedule is always rough in the SEC. LSU's rough schedule is rough. They're on the road at Mississippi State, at Auburn, at South Carolina, at Alabama, at Ole Miss.
Oh, wow.
All of their big games are on the road. So it's already tough enough to navigate the SEC, but to play all those games on the road is not an easy feat.
No, if they come out of this with a shot at, if they win the West, they'll have earned it. That's for certain.
All I know is Les Miles is going to have plenty of grass to taste. And I guess the only big game they really get at home, they're home for Arkansas with third to last game of the year. And it's interesting because, Arkansas is ranked number 18 right now, but where do some of these teams fall when they finally get to these late season games?
Right. I mean, by mid-November, Arkansas could be top 10 or they could have completely fallen out at that point. You just don't know right now.
Yeah.
Geez, man, that is a brutal schedule.
They do get Auburn at home in week 3.
Okay.
Their second SEC game. But, Mississippi State, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. I mean, South Carolina's not going to be great, but it's still road games out there are not easy for some of these.
They've got Eastern Michigan. I'll take that, and Syracuse, but they're not.
McNeese.
Yeah, McNeese. That's
Western Kentucky.
Okay, all right. They do have a few cupcakes on there, but
of course they do. I was
just thinking. At least it's not like one of those. I forget, like the Sacred Heart of whatever it was that we talked about last year that somebody played. Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be a tough road for them. But I like them a lot. I think that they're going. I shouldn't say that I think they're going to win the West, but I think they could cause problems. They're going to be a tough team, and it's going to be the West is going to be incredible. It always is, and it will be again this year.
Yes. Over in the East, Georgia's the high-ranked team. They're number 9 in the country right now. They have another running back that has been touted for some Heisman love. Nick Chubb is his name.
Well, that's unfortunate, huh?
Yeah. Their schedule's not as terrible either. They're at Auburn, and they get Alabama at home, so they do have to play both the Alabama schools. And the other interesting thing is their offensive coordinator this year is Brian Schottenheimer. Of the Marty Schottenheimers.
Yeah. I wouldn't get terribly excited about that if I were a Bulldog fan, I'll tell you that.
No. But Georgia's another team that they should have been much better over these last few years than they have.
Absolutely.
Especially due to the fact how down the rest of their side of the SEC is, with Florida not being so hot. Tennessee's down. South Carolina's in a slump. And I mean, Missouri has won the SEC East the last 2 years. They're going for a third straight division title, something only Alabama and Florida have done, in terms of SEC greatness. So what do you see from Mark Richt's Georgia Bulldogs?
I see the same thing we see every year. They're going to get a lot of preseason love. They're going to come out. They're going to play well in a few games, and they're going to. I mean, let's be honest about it. This is a team that's had opportunities for the last few seasons to really make a mark, and they blow it in the important games. It's as simple as that. And I think you're going to see a lot of that again this year. It's, who do they, let me look at that schedule again here real quick.
Let's see. They have at Vanderbilt, home against South Carolina, home against Alabama, at Tennessee, home against Missouri.
Yeah, I mean,
at Auburn, and of course that ever dangerous last game of the season against Georgia Tech. No, I'm serious.
I know. I love Georgia Tech and that crazy triple option. I do. I love it to pieces.
So
but you look at that. I mean, they could conceivably be 4-0 here, because I don't know. South Carolina, they're kind of like Georgia Light. I mean, they're the same type of thing. They come out and they look great, and then they have to play somebody, and all of a sudden they're not so great anymore.
Yeah, just wait till they play the Southern Jaguars, though.
Right. But they could be 4-0, and then they're going to be probably ranked even higher than they are. And guess what? Alabama's going to show up, and they're going to come crashing right back down to earth. They'll run off a few more wins, and they'll get past Kentucky. They'll be back up again, and then guess what? Auburn's going to come in and go, sorry about that, and that's going to be the end of it. And we'll be talking about, can Georgia Tech knock them off in the last game of the year? I have no faith in Mark Richt. I have no faith in this team. I think they're 9 wins probably, and that's the best I can say about them.
Well, I guess, yeah, their other competition in the SEC East is going to be Missouri and Tennessee. Tennessee's been on the uprise, but I honestly haven't seen a whole lot of Tennessee because they've been down for so long.
Right.
And Mizzou is, Mizzou, it's weird. Like, the first year that they were in the SEC, it was like, okay, they're legitimately pretty all right. Blaine Gabbert was the quarterback of fame to get them to that SEC title game. And then, was that the year that they got blown out by Alabama, or was that the year they got blown out by Auburn?
I don't remember which one, but they got blown out, yeah.
I think the first one was Auburn. Last year was Alabama.
Right.
And so they're going for the third one this year. And last year, Missouri they lost a big game. I forget to who early.
Oh.
And then they kind of snuck under the radar. And South Carolina and Georgia kind of had it amongst themselves, and they both ended up losing a couple games. And then Missouri came around and said, oh, by the way, we just beat South Carolina, and now we're on top of the division, so we're going to go play in the title game. And it's like everyone kind of forgot that they were around.
Yeah.
I kind of forget that they're always in the SEC to begin with.
Well, I don't think anyone in their wildest imagination thought for a second that Missouri would show up in the SEC and run off 2 division titles in a row. I don't think anybody thought that was even possible. And I don't know what to make of them. I mean, I didn't think they were that good last year, but there they were. I didn't think they were that good the year before, and here they were. And they're ranked, like 24 this year? Who knows?
24, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they could be, by the time we get to the important games toward the end of the year, they could have completely fallen off the radar. They could be right back in the thick of it again. I mean, it's hard to, I'm surprised that they've been as successful as they have been in the SEC. I'll say that. I'm kind of glad to see Tennessee coming back. It's a good program. I've always liked them, and I'm hoping that they can finally kind of get back into the swing of things. But probably, I guess, Georgia's to lose again, right?
Yeah.
And they probably will.
Because even the big name teams like Florida, they're working on a new head coach with Jim McElwain from Colorado State. And really the only thing I have to say about Jim McElwain, I mean, he was a good coach. He'll probably get that team back on the right track here in a year or so. But do you see how he showed up to SEC Media Day?
No.
He had the worst sunburn. Like, it was, he had it was either big sunglasses or goggles around his eyes, and he was just red, besides these big white circles around his eyes. It was a good look for somebody. It's like, yeah, you definitely moved from Colorado to Florida, didn't you?
Right. I don't think he probably had any idea just what it's like in Florida, I suppose. A little sunscreen might not have been the worst idea.
Yeah. Florida, they have a patchwork offensive line, pretty talented on defense. Maybe they can sneak something around, but this isn't Florida's time right now. They're working themselves back to
right.
I mean, it's just so weird because again, you think back to when Urban Meyer was in the SEC, and the West was Auburn, it was Alabama, it was LSU, and then in the East you had Georgia and Florida and Tennessee and South Carolina, and everybody was good. And now the East is definitely kind of went down, and Georgia's still holding itself up there with Mark Richt doing what he can, and Mizzou has come in and taken advantage of that. And the West is still a powerhouse, but the East has definitely had a swoon here in the SEC.
I think that if you're a top team from another conference and you have to play that SEC East schedule, I don't think it scares that many people. Whereas the West, you're looking at it going, gee, I think I'd rather play a couple NFL teams than this. But with the East, I don't know that puts a lot of fear into people anymore, where it wasn't like that when Meyer was at Florida. It's just,
But hey, if you ask Kentucky, they SEC.
Okay. They are technically, yeah. I mean,
so Vanderbilt is also it's paid its fee. It is allowed to stay in the SEC football conference.
Their check didn't bounce, so they get to stick around.
They're there to keep the GPA up.
Exactly.
That's what they're there for.
It's fun when they're good and win 7 or 8 games in a year, but that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, it's not, Jay Cutler's there. They win a few games. It's, oh, look at you, Vanderbilt.
Right, exactly.
Spunky. And then they go back to just, being a really good engineering and writing school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But as far as the SEC as the whole goes, the SEC East, I got to give to Georgia. I think that they finally do it this year. They finally knock off Missouri, and they take their mantle as the rightful champion of the SEC East, only to set themselves up for a probable beatdown by the winner of the Iron Bowl. And it's not innovative or anything, but I think you still have to give the benefit of the doubt to Alabama. I would like to see Auburn, make their way into the playoff again. But if it's just a choice, it's really just a choice between those two, I think. And I got to go with Nick Saban until somebody tells me otherwise.
I'm going to go with you with Georgia, but I'm going to take Auburn to win the West.
Okay.
I like Auburn. And I just want to say it again. My sleeper pick is LSU. Not saying they're going to. I'm just saying they could. But I like Auburn. I think it's just their year. It's their turn, basically. And that's why I'm going to go with the Tigers to win that.
And that you would have the winner of the West win the SEC, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
And make the playoff. I think that's kind of assumed. The best coast, the West Coast. It's the Pac-12, and for my money, I may be a homer, but I've heard this from other places, so I can confirm it. The best conference in college football this season.
Wow.
Let's look at the polls. Oregon comes in at number 7, the reigning Pac-12 champion, and of course the national championship runner-up last year, losing to one Ohio State. Number 8, the USC hype train is up and running again, folks.
It sure is.
Just when you thought USC had some down years, oh no, right back into the top 10 at number 8. UCLA's at 13, which is ridiculous. ASU's at 15, and I don't know how to deal with it, but ASU's getting a lot of love from maybe an outside run at the playoffs. Kirk Herbstreit picked them to make the playoff picture this year, so we'll see how that one goes.
Hey, they were just a couple of unfortunate games last year from being right in the thick of it last year.
They were. They really were.
They were. I mean, it wasn't like homerism talking there. That was true. They were right in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm. Stanford at 21. Stanford doing what Stanford does, and Arizona coming in. The Pac-12 South is a beast of a division.
Wow.
So let's run through these real quick. We'll start in the north and get that done quick. Oregon, as I said, number 7 in the country. They come back. They lose Marcus Mariota. We all know him, the new starting quarterback for your irrational confidence Tennessee Titans.
That's right.
Their new starting quarterback is a guy named Vernon Adams. He is a graduate transfer student from Eastern Washington, and he's only been in the system now for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Is 3 weeks enough to learn the Oregon offense?
I don't think so.
And guess who the opponent is week 1? Eastern Washington. As far as, Oregon actually has an interesting schedule, too. They, as we mentioned in the Big Ten, they go to Michigan State in week 2. But as far as the teams they have to play this year, they miss the Arizona schools, or they miss Arizona, who's always given them problems. They miss UCLA, but they're at Arizona State, and they're home against SC, and they're at Stanford. So a little rough there for the Ducks.
They have trouble with Stanford, too.
Yes.
Especially at Stanford, yeah.
Yes. So I think Oregon, again, they're always talented. They're always going to be a talk. They're going to compete in at least in the northern part of this division or this conference. But really my big question mark for them is the quarterback. I mean, Marcus Mariota was all-world. I think he threw 1 interception last year, if I remember correctly, or like maybe 3.
It wasn't a lot. I know that.
But it just I don't know if a quarterback can come in to this system and learn it completely in 3 weeks. I don't know that there's a full season to get him into it, but it's rough.
I don't know if you could learn Wisconsin's offense in 3 weeks, let alone Oregon's.
Yeah.
I mean, Wisconsin's basically we're going to hand off until we need to pass.
Yeah.
But 3 weeks for the Oregon offense. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, week 1, even though he's playing his former team, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. Oregon's just more talented than FCS school is at every position. But week 2 on the road at Michigan State.
Yeah.
Michigan State got up on them early last year, and we all thought, well, maybe this is the year finally Oregon goes down. But that's different when you're at home and you can rally with a Heisman Trophy winner.
Right. When you've got Marcus Mariota and you're at home, it's a little easier. But they're going to be at East Lansing this year with a guy that will be his 5th week of the offense at that point. Yeah. I don't know. That's scary to me.
Yeah. They get Utah at home, and Utah's been up and down. Their defense has been known to knock off a couple schools here. They're at Washington, and Washington's getting better every year too with Chris Peterson there now.
Right.
Cal is going to be much improved, even though that game's up in Oregon. And like we said, Stanford is Stanford. They play a big physical brand of football that can combat the speed of Oregon quite well.
Yeah.
Especially, like we said, when the games are in Palo Alto. So it's definitely not going to be an easy run back to the Pac-12 crown for the Ducks.
That's going to be interesting. I had no idea the quarterback situation was like that out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he was a graduate transfer, and he wasn't there over the summer. He hasn't been reading the playbooks or anything. He's been in camp for 3 weeks.
Well, maybe does Eastern Washington run something similar to what Oregon runs? I mean, maybe does that help? Maybe.
I mean, I couldn't tell you. I haven't seen a whole lot of the red turf.
Yeah, neither have I. I'm just thinking, I mean, there's got to be a reason that they thought he could do this, right? I mean, it wasn't just like we're just that desperate.
He has the talent. Like from the highlights that I can remember seeing, he's definitely a talented quarterback. Now, the issue, of course, is whether he can pick up the schemes and stuff. So early on, you're probably going to see Oregon play a little bit more simpler, which could be good, could be bad. But, for Oregon to be all-in-out Oregon, you have to have a guy that's able to get the ball to the playmakers or run the option correctly and read his cues. And that'll be interesting to see, at least early on in the season, if he can pick up all the concepts that Oregon puts in.
Yeah, I just don't know that a simplified Oregon offense at Michigan State, I don't know that that's the best idea, but that might be the only choice.
Yeah.
That makes that game against Michigan State all the more interesting to me. That's going to be really something. And it's nice to have a big matchup like that in week 2, too.
Yeah. Yeah. The other team in the North to be wary of is the Stanford Cardinal. They're not the same as they were under Jim Harbaugh, but they're still, like I mentioned, big physical team, going to give Oregon fits. I don't know what Stanford's schedule is like this year. Let me pull that up. They open at Northwestern. They're at USC. But it looks like they get most of their big games here at home. They get Arizona is at home, UCLA is at home, Oregon's at home, and Notre Dame's at home. So their big tough games are at home. Stanford? I guess not only are they going to make some noise here in the Pac-12, but if that's Notre Dame's last game of the year, Notre Dame's again been touted as maybe a playoff contender, and that's something that could definitely screw over Notre Dame late in the year.
I don't know that Notre Dame's going to be ranked even number 11 by the time we get there, but assuming that they are, that will be a huge game. I don't think they will be, but
yeah.
But yeah, Stanford's going to be tough. They always are, which is again something that you wouldn't have said probably 20 years ago, but here they are. I still got to, I don't know. I mean, the quarterback thing aside and all that, Oregon it's a system, and if you can plug a guy in and he works out, they're going to be fine. So it's going to come down between those two, I think, in that division.
Cal's going to give people a scare, though. Their quarterback, Jared Goff, can throw the ball really well. They started to finally put up some points last year, and they're working in a brand new refurbished Memorial Stadium up there in Berkeley. So Cal's not going to win anything in terms of titles or anything like that, but they'll be an interesting team as far as maybe throwing a little too much at some of these teams when it comes to high speed offense.
Well, I mean, Washington too with Chris Peterson.
Yes,
they're going to be. I think they're going to be competitive no matter what. So might not be a cakewalk, but I still like Oregon. And then Stanford again. With their history against Oregon, you never know.
Yeah.
But I still got to pick Oregon just because, again, they've earned it, I guess, at this point.
But, I mean, whenever you play against Washington, especially if you're playing them at home and they're wearing their white road jerseys, you just must be intimidated by the iconic jaws of Husky Stadium on their chest. Anyway, and then Washington State, even when they got Mike Leach there as the head coach, some people said, well, maybe they're going to turn it around. No, Washington State's still pretty bad.
Pretty bad, yeah.
And Oregon State has gone back into the cellar too. And of course, like I said, they lost Mike Riley, their head coach, to Nebraska. But the South now, if the SEC West was heralded as this all-world conference, barring Colorado and Utah, the Pac-12 South is a meaty division. You got USC coming in at number 8 in the country in preseason. Like I said, the hype train is finally back on the rails for the Southern California Trojans. Cody Kessler is already the quarterback is being touted as a Heisman contender. I mean, he actually had a very nice year last year. 39 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Sarkisian is dealing with being drunk at a thing.
Yeah, I don't think that's a big deal.
It's not a big deal. I don't think either. There was a lot. I was watching ESPN today, and there were people saying, I guess Pat Hayden finally said, well, he's not going to suspend him. It's like, oh, well, we don't know anything about this treatment he's supposedly undergoing. I thought it was ridiculous that he said, well, I'm going to undergo treatment. So you had some medication that you were prescribed, and you had a little bit too much alcohol. It happens to a lot of people.
I don't know that. Yeah, I didn't get what the big deal was anyway. He had some drinks at a booster or a booster thing, right?
Yeah, it was
Come on,
a pep rally.
Yeah, I mean, really.
Saying, yeah, all these teams suck, and what I get, okay, he got a little excited. And
why is that bad too? I mean, why is that so terrible?
I don't know.
Because we say it as fans, we're like, hey, so and so. I mean, I don't get what the big deal is. Is it not the greatest sportsmanship? Probably not. But you know what? I like the honesty of it, so I'm not going to hold it against him.
But what do you think about USC as a whole? What they bring, and maybe getting back into the upper echelons of college football?
Well, Kessler is a good quarterback. He had a great year last year. He's coming back with another year of experience under his belt. But again, a little bit like Notre Dame, I think there's a little more hype than there is actual substance here. I'm not saying they're not going to be good, but I don't know that I'm ready to crown them as like the number 8 team in the country right now. I'll have to wait and see with them. But
people have been on this train ever since the sanctions got lowered a little bit and Sarkisian came in. Everyone said, well, this is the year that we're finally going to do it. And this is the year that they're finally going to get over the top. And this is the third time I think that we've heard that USC is going to be back. And I agree they're going to be better. They're going to be much better. They're going to contend in the South. They could screw it up for somebody like Arizona State probably. But I don't know if USC is on that next level yet.
I don't think they are.
Next year, definitely, I would give it to them next year. This year, I'm not ready to put them back into the conversation of national title playoff contenders. I
think they're like you. I think they're going to be a lot better, but I just think that they're still a step away. But it's the hype thing. There are teams in college football that benefit a lot from who they are. And if USC shows them improvement, then people tend to overreact to it. Same with Notre Dame, which we will get to in a little while. That they're Notre Dame, they've done this, that, and the other thing, so they must be a whole lot better, and they inevitably get ranked higher than they probably should be. I've seen this happen with USC for years, so I'm not sold on them yet.
Yeah. Next up, a team that we beat on a lot last season, and damn it if I'm not going to do it again, at least early on this season, until they finally lose a couple games and go the hell away. Number 13 is the UCLA Bruins.
I'd just like to point out that we were exactly right about UCLA last year.
Yep. Nobody wanted to listen to us.
Nope.
Now look, UCLA has a lot of talent on the team. Their defensive front seven is going to be really good. Their schedule is helpful because they don't have to play Oregon. They don't have to play some of these tough teams. They're fine. The road schedule is a little rough, but not terrible. Now, we felt this way about UCLA last year when they had a guy like Brett Hundley, who was touted as a Heisman Trophy candidate. I never saw it in him, and he wasn't that. But if people had those lofty expectations for UCLA with a supposed Heisman Trophy candidate under their belt, I don't understand how you can have that same type of hype for them or same type of expectations when just this week they finally named their starting quarterback, and he's a true freshman. Josh Rosen. He was the top recruit in all of LA County, and that's great. And Southern California, we have a lot of great high school football. I see it all the time. There are good players out here, no doubt. But even the Orange County Player of the Year, he's a backup at USC, and I wouldn't expect him to start there. But UCLA says, yeah, no, we had a Heisman Trophy candidate. Now we're going to give, instead of Jerry Neuheisel, I think that's his first, or is it Jim's the father, right?
Rick Neuheisel's the father.
Neuheisel.
Right.
Jerry Neuheisel's his kid. He's there too. He played last year and did decently well, but I guess not good enough. So you bring in a true freshman to be your starting quarterback for the supposed number 13 team in the country. I don't see it. Like UCLA, they're going to be talented. They're going to win their games. They're probably going to go to a bowl. They're not. I don't see them as winning even the division, let alone winning the conference, let alone challenging for a playoff spot. I think there.
I think they're very similar to USC. I think USC's better.
I do too.
But I think they're very. I think if 8-4, 9-3 is going to be a good season for them. But are they the number 13 team in the country? I don't think so.
No.
And they were ranked even higher than this last year, and we knew back then that they were an imposter, and they kept winning and they kept climbing the rankings. We kept saying this is just a mirage. Do not believe it. And we were exactly right. I don't know. You take away Brett Hundley, bring in a true freshman quarterback, and they're supposed to be just as good. I'm with you. I don't buy it either.
Yeah. Here's the games they're going to lose this year. I'm going to tell you right now because I'm looking at their schedule. They'll beat UVA. They'll beat UNLV. They'll beat BYU. We'll start out 3-0.
I'm going to back up for a second. I'm not so sure about BYU, but go ahead.
I'll give them 3-0. Everybody will be on UCLA's jock, and oh my God, here come the Bruins. But guess what? They're going to lose to Arizona. They're going to lose to Arizona State. They're going to lose to Stanford. They might just lose to Cal. Cal's going to put up points. They'll beat Colorado. They'll beat Oregon. They'll beat Washington State. They'll lose at Utah. They'll lose at USC. UCLA is going to lose like 5 or 6 games this year.
Ah, wow. Yeah, you know what?
UCLA's going to tumble hard.
I'm not even ready to give them the BYU game like you are.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't, with that schedule too, where's this coming from?
I don't know.
I mean,
and the thing with these rankings, of course, we always talk about it. Preseason rankings are stupid.
Well, they're meaningless.
They're stupid to have. Like, I understand you get it so that we have a barometer or whatever, but let them play a game because anybody could be good on paper. You can put UCLA number 13, and yeah, they're going to win these first 3 games, and they might just work their way into the top 10 for whatever reason, because somebody up there might lose a game or two for, reasons.
Who knows? Yeah.
But then Arizona's, we might as well say it now. Arizona, the Wildcats, their defense is amazing. I think Scooby Wright is just a talent at defensive end. He's going to wreak havoc on the entire conference. And I think he could get to UCLA pretty easy. Arizona State is going to put up all the points this year. Arizona State is going to score so many damn points this year. It's not even going to be funny. And their defense is much better, too. Stanford on the road, like we already said, Stanford's a big physical team that can beat up a team that's not ready to play them, like UCLA may not just be. Cal can put up points, but again, that's kind of a toss-up. Colorado, blah, 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 blah. But at Utah, UCLA has had a ton of trouble with the Utah Utes since they've come into the Pac-12. And at USC, with USC being better this year, they're not going to win that game either, I don't think. So UCLA, enjoy your hype train now, because your true freshman starting quarterback is going to get a nice hard lesson when he goes down to Tucson in week 4.
Well, here's the thing with UCLA, and I like the Bruins. I do. I know that you don't, but I do like them.
What? Where did you tell that? Where did you think that I don't like UCLA?
But I've seen this happen with them so many times over the years. It's been just a running thing. Yeah. And again, they're probably, 9-3 would be a great season for them. 8-4 is probably, 7-5. If I had to place money on it, I'm putting in between, 7 and 8 wins. I don't see them as a 13 ranked team in the country. I'm sorry. I don't buy it. And especially not with a true freshman as starting quarterback. And I think
it's just funny. Like, UCLA has this big athletic reputation, but their football team has always been kind of like this.
Yeah, that's what they've been my entire life, honestly.
Yeah,
I think they've made the Rose Bowl a couple of times over the years, but I mean, they've always been, 2-3 losses, fun to watch sometimes, but just, second tier all the way.
And you know what, UCLA, you don't have to make the Rose Bowl because you make it every home game. Moving up the Pac-12.
Poor UCLA, boy, they don't get a lot of love on this show, do they? I think that was the nicest thing we've ever said about them, what I just said there.
Yeah. Number 15 is the Arizona State Sun Devils. Like you said, Greg, they were in contention at least 2/3 of the way through the season. I was getting a little excited. I was looking down the road a little bit, and I'm sure Arizona State was a little bit too, and they kind of got caught up and lost. I forget who they lost to. That was dumb.
It was a bad loss. I remember.
I think it was like Utah or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, this year they come out of the gate with a very tough game to open the season. I don't know, very tough, but they're playing in Houston against Texas A&M. Now, Texas A&M is not as good as they were with Johnny Manziel, surely, but they're still a name school in the SEC, and the game's in Texas, so that's going to be a big test for ASU to kind of put their stamp on the start of the season at the least. Then they get USC at home in week 4, and so that's the other thing. They're big. Their couple big Southern California games are early in their schedule, so they can get USC at home. They're on the road at UCLA.
They got Oregon at home.
Yeah, that's the other thing, though. They have to play Oregon, but they do get them at home. They have to go to Utah, which I already said is tough. And they get Arizona is the Territorial Cup is a home game for the Sun Devils this year. Again, as we mentioned with the Iron Bowl, this is a game where home field never matters in that game. And this is probably going to be one of the better additions of this game with Arizona's defensive ability. They have some nice offense with Solomon returning a quarterback. And Arizona State has a lot of offensive weapons. Mike Bercovici, the quarterback, DJ Foster, the running back. And on defense, they're just as fast and just as they're a ball hawking type team. They can force a lot of turnovers under Todd Graham. I'm a homer, but I truly do believe, that's trying to be as objective as possible here, that Arizona State is going to be. I think Arizona State is the best team in the Pac-12 South.
I'm going to agree with you. I am. The bad loss they had last year was Oregon State.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I think they're the best team in the conference, or in the southern part of the conference. Now, the thing that's going to be hard is if Oregon does win the Pac-12 North, then they're going to have to play Oregon twice, assuming that Arizona State wins the South, because they would have to play Oregon at home in last weekend of October. And then they would have to I guess the Pac-12 title game is still in Levi Stadium, I would think.
Provided they have any kind of field to play on by then, yeah.
Provided the grass is still intact, yeah.
Right.
So winning the Pac-12 is going to be no easy feat for anybody. Because I think USC also plays Oregon. I may be wrong.
I think they do, yeah.
So trying to beat Oregon twice is going to be rough for anybody. But if Arizona State can win the games on their schedule, like they're Kirk Herbstreit, like I said, has put them into his playoff picture. It's weird to have that kind of expectation put on Arizona State, but if at the beginning of the season they have some good ranked teams, they're all in their conference. They're good. They open with an SEC school. That's something that could go into the strength of schedule factor, and maybe they can win some games for them down the road.
Oh, your mic just came unplugged.
That's what I thought I heard in my headset.
But I will say that that loss last year, that derailed them. I mean, these guys, they aren't idiots on the team. They knew what they were playing towards last year, and when the Oregon State thing happened, it derailed the season for them, and I think they knew it. This was a team that was good enough to be there last year, I thought.
Yeah, you look at that game last year against Notre Dame when they get Notre Dame at home. Notre Dame was ranked
number 8,
and they just kicked the crap out of them. And so ASU, they were up there. They had it in their hands, and then they lost a dunk game. So as long as they can keep their heads on straight, they still have a lot of talent coming back, especially on offense. This team is going to throw the ball. They're going to outpace any team on offense. They're going to be right there with anybody when it comes to an offensive shootout. So I got to give a big benefit of the doubt for my Sun Devils. And again, I think, like we said, I think whoever wins the Pac-12, based on the strength of the rest of college football, will have a spot in the playoff.
Oh, definitely.
Come the end of the season.
And no doubt about it. I think that if you want to pick a conference right now, it's on the outside looking in. It's the ACC. Yeah. I think. But I'm with you. I thought Arizona State last year. I mean, we talked about it. We saw it last year. They were on their way. But they just had that tough loss to Oregon State, and things just kind of because this is a team that's not used to being in that position. This year, they've got that behind them now. They're kind of a step closer to it. I like them a lot. I think USC, it's more hype than substance. I definitely think that with UCLA. Arizona, that's always a tricky game for them, but I like them to win the South, definitely. And it's going to be, I think they can beat Oregon. I do.
I do too. Because I think Oregon is finally going to hit a downslope here. Because the quarterback thing still doesn't sit right with me. I don't think you have to have the right guy running that system.
Right.
And I don't know if a guy coming in with 3 weeks experience can do that. Especially because he's also moving from the FCS to the FBS.
Right.
It's not like it's not like what we'll talk about with Everett Golson going from Notre Dame to Florida State. That's comparable.
Right.
This is not the same thing.
This isn't even like he came from Washington State to Oregon. I mean, let's be honest about it. Like you said, position for position, Oregon is better at every single spot on the field than Eastern Washington is.
Yes.
And every defense he faced last year is not anywhere near as good as the defenses he's going to face every week at this level of football. It's a big adjustment to make.
Yep. So to wrap up the Pac-12, winning the South, I'm going to be a homer, but I think as we've said, there's a lot to it. Arizona State to win the South. And I'm going to go with Stanford in the North. And then I'll have Arizona State winning the Pac-12 and making the playoff.
I'm going to agree with that. I want to pick Oregon, but I think Stanford, they've got Oregon at home this year, and I'm going to go with you right there. I think Arizona State wins it.
We'll move to the redheaded stepchild of conferences. The ACC, I don't know. Florida State comes in ranked number 10. Now they lose Jameis Winston. The team has talent still. But Everett Golson's going to be the starting quarterback. And if he's anything like he was when he was playing at Notre Dame, who comes in at 11, and also, again, Notre Dame playing, they have the agreement with the ACC where they play a lot of ACC teams. So we'll throw them in here. Notre Dame's at 11. Clemson's at 12. I don't know. Florida State, they'll be fine, but they're not going to be anywhere close to the levels they were in years past. Clemson's
going to Clemson.
There are people that are high on Clemson this year, and I just don't know why.
They're going to do what they always do. They are the Georgia of the ACC. They're going to look great, and then they're going to come along and trip over themselves in a game they probably should have won. And we'll be right back where we always are with them.
Well, and setting up with those two and putting that into perspective, number 16 is my ACC title pick, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
Wow. We are just like in lockstep this year because that's my pick too.
Because, Georgia Tech, they've worked their way up to be respectable again. They're still a good team. That offense gives everyone fits, no matter who it is or when. And they're on the easier side of the ACC for sure. They'll make it to the title game and give anybody a run for their money. But let's look at the ACC in the Atlantic Division. Florida State, again, they're going to be good, but not anywhere close to where they've been.
And they're not going to have the benefit of being the defending national champions to help them in the polls this year.
No, there's nobody in this group that I see being a playoff contender.
If Florida State plays,
even if we like Georgia Tech, but they're still not going to get to that point.
If Florida State plays like they did last year, this year, they're not going to be in shouting distance of the playoff because they, again, we talked about it a lot last season. They played a lot of games where it was close. They were having a hell of a time beating teams a defending national champion should have no trouble beating. And they're not going to have that benefit of the doubt this year. So it's going to be a struggle for them to even get into the conversation. They're going to have to go out and just kick some serious butt right out of the gate to get into the conversation, I think.
Louisville is in there too. Louisville's got a pretty decent defense, but again, the offense not there. And they open with Auburn in week 1, and that'll probably put a damper on their season right out of the get-go. Boston College is down. NC State is down. Wake Forest is terrible. Syracuse is
horrible.
Why is Syracuse in this stupid conference? And then Clemson, no matter how, Clemson has to have those all-world type talents to even be considered for, the next step of being a competitive team. Remember when they had Taj Boyd? He was a pretty good quarterback, but I guess people are saying that Clemson is pretty decent at running back. It's not going to get them anywhere of significance.
This conference, I think, to get a team in the playoff they're going to need a team to just go out and just exceed expectations to such a point that you can't deny them. And I just don't see a team in this conference that can do that.
I guess it helps that they're up so high in the rankings right now. But if Florida State were to somehow go undefeated this year, would they be? Let's look at it. Let's say that you've got undefeated Ohio State, undefeated. See, that's the TCU.
Thing. The SEC champion.
Give them a loss.
And the Pac-12. I guess if they go undefeated, maybe. But again, like I said, they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt like they got last year because I think we were all in agreement that when the Final Four came out last year for the playoff, everybody said, if there's a team that shouldn't be there, it's not Ohio State, it's probably Florida State just because of how they played, even though they were undefeated. So I don't think they're going to get that benefit this year.
And Florida State, they're on the road for the Georgia Tech game and the Clemson game. So I don't see Florida State even being undefeated. So I don't think that's in the conversation. Clemson, they're the only other team of that division that has any sort of claim. They get Notre Dame and Georgia Tech at home. They get Florida State at home. I guess the schedule works out for Clemson, but
they can't punch that ticket though. They can't get past. They always seem to blow a game that they should win.
Yeah.
And until they prove otherwise, I've just got to think they're going to keep doing that.
Yeah, their starting quarterback is coming back from an ACL tear, so we'll see how he takes over Deshaun Watson.
I do think though that for a team out of this conference to make the playoff, they're going to have to go undefeated. I don't see a one-loss team out of this conference making the playoffs unless a lot of crazy things happen everywhere else.
Yeah. In the Coastal Division, like we said, we love Georgia Tech.
Absolutely.
Even when Georgia Tech's not good, you still love Georgia Tech just because they always they give everybody just a wrench to deal with, and you put some talent on the squad like they have now, and they're going to be more than competitive in this conference.
Well, what about our Duke Blue Devils? Are we going to see another run out of them this year?
No, I don't think so. No more 10-win Duke teams.
Too bad.
North Carolina's having issues. I've seen a lot of people giving some love to Pitt. They lost their head coach. Pat Narduzzi from Michigan State is now the head coach. And Pitt, they get the break when it comes to the schedule. They don't have to play Florida State or Clemson, and the majority of their big games are at home.
I think it's probably Georgia Tech, Clemson, and Florida State, and then everybody else in this conference.
Yeah, Pitt also has a good running back who was the ACC Player of the Year last year.
And great uniforms when they wear the right combinations.
Yeah. And then Virginia, good defense, but they're down. Virginia Tech, good defense, but no offense. Now, I think the team that's the most interesting in terms of just conversation-wise is the U.
Yeah.
Miami. Al Golden came in from Temple, and he was going to change Miami. He was going to bring them back to being the U. And they've slowly improved.
We're kind of still waiting for that, aren't we?
But they're not, right, they're not getting there quite yet. Does even the little bits of improvement, do you think that Al Golden's on the hot seat? Do you think that he needs to maybe win the division and make noise going into a bowl game to keep his job?
How many years has he been there now?
This is actually Al Golden's, this is going to be his 5th year at Miami.
Yeah, he's got to get something done this year. He's probably gone.
Yeah,
especially depending on who becomes available, who the hot coordinator is and all that coming at the end of the season.
And they've had opportunities. They were pretty high, was it 2 years ago? I think they got up to number 12 or I think they even got to number 10. And then they just kind of fell apart and they just couldn't put it together. Now they have a pretty decent quarterback with Brad Kaya, but, again, being pretty decent in the ACC is not a high bar to set, really.
No.
So, if they, let's see their schedule, they get Nebraska at home, they're at Florida State, Clemson at home against Georgia Tech. Things kind of work out in their favor, but I don't know. This is a team that has to show it to be,
right.
I don't think we could put anything on them right now. They have to prove that they are good enough, and we'll see what they can do. But, the ACC, not at its height of the height of its powers anymore.
Not exactly, no.
So I guess we both said Georgia Tech, so that we would have them winning the Coastal. I guess winning the Atlantic.
I'm going to take the Seminoles.
Yeah, I think you have to.
And it comes down just like last year. Can the Ramblin' Wreck take down Florida State? Boy, that's tough.
We can say Georgia Tech all we want, but then when you look at it, it's can they beat them?
I'd like to see them beat them, but you know what? I don't know that they can. That offense gives you fits, but I got to go with Florida State. It's a weak conference, and I'd love to see Georgia Tech win it, but I got to give the nod to Florida State.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech wins the Coastal. Like I said, I'd love to see them win too, but I don't trust Clemson, and if anything, I had to trust Jimbo Fisher and just the talent that Florida State is going to have.
Exactly.
But hey, still not going to mean that we won't root for you, Georgia Tech.
Oh, absolutely.
We got your back.
Absolutely. We will jump right on your bandwagon the minute you give us a reason to.
And before we get away from the ACC, the other team that we need to talk about is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now they obviously have that agreement with the ACC. They'll be playing. They're home against Georgia Tech. They'll be at Clemson. They're also at Pitt, home against Wake, and home against Boston College. Notre Dame also plays Texas in week 1. They play Virginia. USC, of course, they get the home game for USC. It's a night game there in South Bend, and they finish up at Stanford. Now, Malik Zaire is going to be the starting quarterback as Everett Golson has transferred to Florida State. What do we make of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish?
Well,
Too much hype again?
You talked about the hype machine being in full force with USC. I think you take it up a notch, and that's what you got with Notre Dame. We have seen this too many times with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Yeah. Too many times.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at their schedule. Okay. They could lose to Georgia Tech. They could lose to Clemson. USC is going to beat them. Let's see what else here. Stanford's going to beat them. All of us, you're looking at definitely at least 2 losses right now, maybe up to 4. I don't see them as being a serious contender for a playoff. I know Sports Illustrated has them picked as a playoff team, and I'm not buying it. I don't see it for a second. Not at all.
If they win these games on their schedule, then yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they can beat SC, beat Clemson, then yes. But I don't know. This is also Chip Kelly's 5th year at Notre Dame. He's gotten to one national championship game and got curb stomped by Alabama. I don't know. I never really know what to make of Notre Dame because what are you supposed to judge them against?
Exactly.
And the thing with them, they're not even playing their traditional Notre Dame schedule anymore. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Michigan State. Yes, they get USC and yes, they get BC and Stanford, but Temple, UMass, Texas in a down year. What a Navy? Yeah, I guess they get a Navy game, but what do you learn about Notre Dame from any of those games? Nothing really.
That's what I mean. For them to be seriously considered, they've got to knock off Georgia Tech. They've got to beat Clemson.
Oh yeah, to be seriously considered, they have to run the table on their schedule.
I mean, they could maybe lose one of those games, but it better be to either USC or Stanford.
Yeah,
because anything short of that,
they better be highly ranked.
Yeah, anything short of that's not going to be enough. And I don't buy it. I mean, this is, they're the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. If you give the voters a little bit of hope with this team, they will overhype them right into a position that they don't deserve. And they are ranked number 12 or 11? No, I'm not there with them. No.
Yeah, number 11 in the AP poll.
They're a lot like UCLA. They're probably going to, 8-4, maybe 9-3, maybe even 10-2, but I'd seriously doubt it. But they're not a playoff contender.
We've hit every other ranked team in the preseason. The only non-Power 4, I guess we did, Power 5 conference team to be ranked in the top 25 is the Boise State Broncos. They're number 23. Boise State, they won 12 games last year, including knocking off Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl. They're the home bowl for the Boise State Broncos at this point. You look at their schedule, there's not a whole lot to it. They get Washington at home to open the season, but then the rest is your basic Mountain West type schedule. Based on the talent that Boise State has, and they're going to be very, very good defensively, and we know what they can do on offense. If the Boise State Broncos, currently preseason number 23, go undefeated, their only big conference teams they beat would be Virginia and Washington and an independent BYU.
It would be interesting because the strength of schedule plays a pretty big role in the playoff selection process. So if they go undefeated, and here's the question, let's say that they do go undefeated, and you've got 1-loss teams in every other conference, what do you do? Do they get in? Because, let's be honest about it. I mean, I like an underdog story as much as anybody else does, but they will have not played anyone.
Right.
Based on what everybody else has done.
Now that the computers are not a factor, and the computers always loved Boise, I don't think they would get in if it's just based on human eyes. Unless Boise's doing something really, out there, and they're beating everybody by like 20 or 30 points.
Right.
I think, if anything, what you would then have, if Boise State were to go undefeated and not make the playoff, that's when you would start to get the bigger conversation of, well, we already made the playoff of 4 teams. Mm-hmm. When do we get to go to 6?
Right.
Because we had TCU on the outside last year, and they should have got in. Boise State this year, they should have gotten in. That's what would spur on I think that's what would come from that. I don't think they would actually make the playoffs myself either, but they would at least get the conversation of, well, maybe we do 6 teams with a bye sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean I think the first question everybody asked after last year, because of how great it was, why don't we make it 6 or 8 teams? And I can see the argument both ways. I like it at 4 because you've really got to prove it to get there. You're always going to have an argument. Even if you move it to 6, then team number 7 is going to always make a case. If you move it to 8, team number 9 is going to make a case.
Right. But I think the thing, though, is that once you get to a certain point, you can say, okay, well, you know what? Number 8 or number 12 team in the country, you don't have a shot to win the national title. Stop it. There is a reasonable point to say, okay, these are if you have, I think 6 works. 8 might be a little too much, but I think we'll eventually get to 8.
I think, yeah, I think they're locked into 4 for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Because of the success of it and because of how fun it is. And I don't know, maybe 8 teams wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I don't know. I really liked it at 4, and 8 might be fun too. With Boise State, I think what you'd have to have happen is you're going to need a 2-loss SEC team, a 2-loss Ohio State, whoever comes out of the Big Ten. Then you might have to start putting them in the conversation. But right now, if they go undefeated, they're not going to knock off a 1-loss team from one of the Big 4 conferences. Could they knock out, say, if it comes down to 1 loss, say Georgia Tech versus undefeated or Boise State? Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. But right now, it would really take a really impressive performance by them to be able to make a real strong case for it at going undefeated. This is where you can make a strong argument for an 8-team playoff, because then you can say, okay, if Boise State runs the table and goes undefeated, we're going to put them in. They can be the 8th seed or whatever. But yeah, it's going to take a lot for them, and they're not playing even close to the schedule they used to play back in the Chris Peterson years.
No, there's nothing there.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a nice story, but if they go 12-0, I don't know that they've got a case either way.
Let's pick our 4 playoff teams then, shall we? I'm going to go TCU, Ohio State, Arizona State, and Alabama.
I'm right there with you. We're going to go Ohio State out of the Big Ten. Out of the SEC, I'm taking Auburn. I like the Arizona State Sun Devils out of the Pac-12, and I'm going to take the TCU Horned Frogs out of the Big 12.
Do the Ohio State Buckeyes go back-to-back? When's the last back-to-back titles we had? USC?
I thought it was Florida.
Florida?
Didn't Florida win 2 in a row? Yeah. I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the homer pick. I'm going to say my Ohio State Buckeyes beat your Arizona State Sun Devils in the national championship. How do you like that?
Well, wouldn't that be
that'd be something, huh? Yeah.
I really like the way my Sun Devils look. I'm not going to pick them to win the whole thing. I think I got to go with Ohio State again, too. At least from looking at it from a preseason standpoint, they have too much going for them. They showed a lot last year. Now, who's to say if Ohio State and Alabama met up again,
right.
I don't think Nick Saban would want to turn the tables on that one.
And looking at it, and again, when you talk college football, really any football, you can't really base anything on last year's performance. But that's all you've got to go by, and the way they played last year towards the end of the season, I got to think that until somebody knocks them off, the Buckeyes are the team to beat.
Want to talk about week 1?
Yeah, let's. We got anything worth talking about in week 1?
Oh, there's games.
We got Ohio State, Virginia Tech, which at least it's 2 teams that you've heard of. That's always good.
There's Utah, Michigan on Thursday.
That'll be good.
In Utah.
That should be a really good game, I think.
I do too. I think it's going to be really entertaining to watch.
And
beyond all the outside stuff, but I think it's just going to be a pretty good football game.
And we get to see Michigan's new road uniforms, right?
Which are really nice.
Yeah, they're going to look good. For the opening week of the season, a pretty decent slate of games. So we've got, Utah, Michigan, Ohio State, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, and Texas.
Washington, Boise State is on Friday night.
That's going to be an interesting game too.
Arizona State, Texas A&M, Saturday night.
It's a surprisingly good week 1 of games for college football.
Yeah, and even if the slate was bad, that Saturday or Thursday night, Saturday morning, you're going to turn on college football and it's going to be on the TV all day long.
Absolutely. That's
the preview. That's the look ahead to week 1, and guess what? Football's here.
We're underway.
It's finally here. Oh, this has been basically a football show. Next week, we'll talk about the NFL, and we'll talk about week 1 and college football. It'll be great. Follow us on all of our various platforms. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're on iTunes. We're on Spreaker. We're on Stitcher. We're on YouTube. Anything else to say before we head out of this one, Greg?
Go Bucks.
Go Devils. See you next week on Basically a Football Show.